The Skin Was Once Mine and Other Disturbances is a collection of four dark, terrifying, claustrophobic tales that all center around human connections, the things we do when we love someone, the things we do when we want to keep someone in our life, uh, and things we do when we grieve, and also things we do to transgress and achieve a new state of being. The whole collection is really tethered by that uniform theme of connection.
And I'm going to start this out a little light and not specifically about the book, but we will get to the book. But I guess it's kind of tangentially about the book because I saw that you had dedicated the book to Paul Tremblay, who anybody who knows me knows I've been, a dedicated reader of Paul for as long as I've known of him, which is like 13 years or something at this point. And so in my mind, I'm like, ooh, that makes total sense. But what I'm curious about is like, what inspired you to dedicate the book to him, and like what is your kind of connection with Paul?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, aside from the fact that Paul is an incredible and supremely talented author of horror and dark fiction, I connected with Paul like right after Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke kind of blew up for me. And at the time, I was meeting like a lot of different folks in the horror community, a lot of like really big names, and Paul was one of the amazing people that I met that was just so genuine, so kind, and so generous with his time. It felt like a really natural, organic connection, the two of us, and I felt like we kind of spoke the same language. And since this collection is really about human connection, I mean, that's, distilling it to like the simplest of terms, it felt like really natural to just dedicate the book to him, somebody that I recently connected with, that I recently became friends with, and uh, I found like goodness in him, because so much of this book is about the depravity and like the wickedness, the awfulness of humanity, and the cruelty of the human race. But I really wanted to kind of frame it with someone who has been so kind to me and has been so gracious with me in his time. It felt like a nice kind of little element to complement all the darker aspects of the book, because from there on out it's just like endless, gore and torture and depravity and cruelty. So I really wanted like I wanted like a sweet note at the beginning of the book
Yeah.
to really complement that awfulness. And when I was thinking of who I wanted to dedicate this book to, I struggled to think of anybody other than Paul, because his writing has meant so much to me prior to me working in the publishing industry. I read a lot of his books prior to uh, you know publishing as a horror author, and it just felt very natural to dedicate the book to him, and to just honor his friendship with me.
That absolutely makes sense, and I share a lot of sentiment with you about Paul. Not in the exact same way, but I've just known Paul, and I've seen, yeah, like there's a genuineness to him when he interacts with people. When he says something nice, he really cares. When he gives you time, it's because it's important to him. Like he's a very genuine person, and so I can totally understand that. But like, yeah, from a talent perspective, I just finished reading the upcoming horror movie. I'm pointing because it's on my shelf back there. I think it's that one right there. You're in the middle here. All your
Yeah,
stuff's in the
amazing. I love it.
middle. But I just finished reading that, and I hadn't read. His last novel that came out was a couple of years ago, so it'd been a while, and I'd read a bunch of books in between. And I'm reading horror movie, and it just keeps hitting me like he's so good at giving you these like incredibly human moments
Mhm.
where he's just tapping into the absolute humanity of a person, whether it's good or bad or just kind of boring or whatever. Like I think he likes to kind of hang out in that like mundanity of people thing a lot. But like
Yeah.
also he's so good at doing very moving emotional stuff and very disturbing dark stuff too. So when you're talking about talent, like I just kept it was like I was getting physically hit. I was reading the book and like a quote would hit me and I was like, oh man, I have to stop and think about this. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of empathy in his writing too when he writes about people doing awful things and when the supernatural gets introduced. I feel like there is a lot of empathy in his work, and I definitely try to replicate that in my own work. I
Hmm.
really try to, present characters that maybe you don't love, but they are people, and hopefully you are invested in them. And I feel like Paul does such an amazing job at weaving those characters throughout his narratives.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible, and I feel like every new one gets better somehow.
Yeah.
My running theme, and it's actually funny because you said about empathy. My running theme with Paul books is like when read I would finish reading one of his books and immediately my first thing on social media was like Paul Tremblay made me cry again.
Yeah.
And that was my ongoing thing was like every time I like he just that end of that book just tore me up and it was every single book and it became like it's like a running joke at this point. So
Yeah, I haven't read Horror Movie yet, but hopefully I think Titan's going to send me a copy, so I am looking forward to that.
yeah. Oh, that was a poorly timed sip.
No worries.
um so moral of the story, Paul's great. We all love Paul.
Paul's an icon. Yep.
And definitely book dedication worthy. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen other books dedicated to him. I'm sure he's been thanked like crazy in acknowledgments and stuff. But yeah, that's awesome. Kind of tangential to that, because I'm just curious because this is a friendship or a camaraderie with a peer. And so, what are your other really strong connections, whether it's in horror writing or other authors in general? Like, what's your not crew, but like, what's your like go to people that you have a lot of respect for?
Well, I mean, I definitely like have a little bit of a crew that I feel like, my squad. So I have them, and then I have like obviously people that um, are just icons that I revere and respect. I obviously really respect the people that I, associate with that are my close friends, but I mean people that are like legends, like Clive Barker, Mariana Enriquez,
Mm,
um, just people that have really shaped my imagination. Billy Martin, Poppy Z. Bright, Kathy Koja. Although Kathy has become somewhat of a good friend, so that's been
mm,
really special and kind of surreal because I read Kathy's Skin when I was in college and just completely like completely redid my whole brain chemistry when I read that book. And then there are like my really good friends that I'm super close with, like Clay McLeod Chapman, who's awesome, Nat Cassidy, Rachel Harrison, just like really sweet, loving people who just have my back. I feel like, and
yeah.
are just writing. We're all writing really different kinds of horror fiction. Um, but I feel like there's respect there, and it's just really special to kind of be in their company and share time with them. It's really really cool. But as far as like people that I really admire, I would definitely say, like I said, like Clive Barker. Um, I also read like when I was growing up a lot of like Roald Dahl.
Hmm.
So like I loved any like Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode that was like adapted from a story by him. Um, who else? Brian Evanson's another one.
Oh yeah.
Brian actually has become like a really good friend, and that's been crazy just because. Like I've read pretty much every Brian Evanson book, and I just am obsessed with his work. And he's just the sweetest, most just kindest person ever. Just so sweet. And he writes like the most just the weirdest and most just out there stuff. And he's just such a sweetheart. And I feel like that's true of like everybody that I'm really close with, like in horror.
Mhm.
um Daniel Kraus is another one. He's been like super supportive of me, and um, his books are just absolutely amazing. Like Whale Fall, obviously,
Yeah.
just like an iconic book. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like really fortunate because I've been reading a lot of these folks for many years now, and I feel like I'm kind of allowed to sit at their table now,
Mm.
and that's just like really rewarding, like to get that validation from people that you really respect and really admire. It's just like it's so special, and it makes me so excited to just get up every day and write and be creative.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And I think that of especially this comes up a lot when I'm talking. I don't talk exclusively with horror authors, but the majority of the time I have been lately because I think it's just easy to get caught up in the enthusiasm for what's being put out right now,
Hmm.
um, and the whole spectrum of it. Because you have kind of lighthearted, more fun stuff. You have some really dark stuff. You've got kind of everything in between, and there's so much good stuff being put out. I forgot where I was going this, but the a common thing that comes up when I'm talking to people who are of the horror genre or primarily is like the community and how enthusiastic people are. And so I love seeing that too. I think that one of the reasons that I so many horror authors recently are on my radar is because everybody so enthusiastically promotes each other.
Hmm.
It's beautiful to see, but it also kind of like it means I have to catch up. So like a lot of the people that you mentioned, like Clay McLeod Chapman and Rachel Harrison and um, a few of the others are people who I just started reading because
Yeah.
you know I've there's so many good people out there, but immediately like falling in love with their writing. So um, I guess I kind of rambled there, but I think there's something to the horror community and like the enthusiasm that goes with whatever moment is happening right now that makes it easy to like feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, like horror writers, I feel like are, I don't know. I've met so many now that I've met very few awful
Yeah,
horror people. Like everybody I meet is so welcoming and so kind, and it feels like maybe because we purge our darkest parts of ourselves on the page,
yeah,
I feel like maybe that contributes to why most of us are really pleasant and kind and supportive. Um, yeah, I think you're right. Like, um, there's definitely something to be said about like how just generally supportive the horror community is, and I think
yeah,
that's so special. And I think like we're in a horror renaissance right now, which is
yeah,
so exciting. For so long, horror was such a dirty word and was considered like a gutter genre, which I hate to say, but
yeah,
um, horror really has now become. I hope it's become regarded pretty well by people from what I see, and it's gotten to levels of new like sophistication and elegance, and I think it's really really inspiring.
I 100% agree, and I hope that it continues to grow and evolve and all of that.
I hope
A
so too.
side a side note about Brian Evanson, because that man has earned my eternal respect
Yeah,
for a couple of very small reasons. First of all, if you're friends with him on Facebook, he will say happy birthday on your birthday
he really
with
will.
without fail. Like all it's insane how like good
Yeah.
he is at saying happy birthday, which is like a dumb small thing, but like when you realize that that guy is just die hard on saying happy birthday, there's something to that. There's like
That's sweet.
there's a characteristic to that that's
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
And then the two times I've gotten to interview him, I'm going to tell you this is really quick. One time I interviewed, we talked in advance, set up a day and a time, get on the call. And the first time, I believe, he's like, yeah, if my voice sounds a little raspy or bad, it's because I just had surgery yesterday or something. It was either surgery or like an endoscopic kind of thing or something like that that was with his throat. And he's like, yeah, so if I sound a little off, it's just because I had that medical procedure. And I'm like, do you need to like reschedule? He's like, no, we're good. And he was totally cool with it. The other time I interviewed Brian, um, at the same thing, we schedule in advance and get on the call. And I swear to you, and I know someone's gonna go and like check the facts of this at some point in my life, but he gets on the call and he's like, yeah, I might be a little tired. Like my son was born yesterday. And I'm like, do you need to reschedule? He's like, nah, we're good.
That's
It's like
amazing.
so generous with his time in
Yeah.
situations where like the most legitimate reason to just be like, hey, can we do this another time? And you just roll with it. Like the guy was just ready to go. It was,
He's
yeah.
so special, and he's someone that, like, if he believes in you, he will open doors for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't tell you the amount of kind things he's done for me just because he likes my work and is just, a supporter. He's brilliant, brilliant person, really
Yeah.
just amazing writer and an even better human being, I think.
I will endlessly respect, like, if that guy's like, hey, Rob, I just need you to piggyback me back to my hotel because my car broke down, and be like, hop on, buddy,
Yeah,
because
like, no problem.
he's such a good dude. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought him up. I like Brian a lot.
yeah,
So I guess we're kind of starting out this conversation the way you started the book, with like a little bit of like a happy note before we talk about the depravity. But I don't want to get off that yet, because I want to zoom out a little bit, and
okay,
I want to talk about. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I bother the hell out of my girlfriend because every time I see a post where your mom is in a bookstore holding up your books,
yeah.
I'm like, honey, his mom's showing his books again. And I'm like, it's something that has so charmed me that your mom is so
Oh,
enthusiastic and supportive of you that she'll, like, every time she sees your books, she has to like make note of it.
yeah,
And so there's not even a question there. I just want to say that energy going out into the world is just a happiness. And
yeah.
I think it's really fun. And it's the cutest thing that, like, especially knowing how dark your work can be, that doesn't have any impact on how much she cares about and supports you.
She has been my biggest supporter since day one. Obviously, she is. I don't know. I love my mom with all my heart. I love her. She has never questioned anything about me, my character. Especially when I got into writing, like, kind of more extreme body horror. She never had a moment where she was like kind of concerned or questioning me, like, why are you writing this? Always from with her. It always came from a place of love and support and just kindness. She just loves me unconditionally, and I feel I'm just I'm just really lucky that she's my mom, and she reads pretty much all of my material that I've published.
Yeah.
And it's funny, she read a novel of mine that we haven't announced yet. We're gonna hopefully announce it either end of this month or like beginning of next month. And it's definitely, I think, my darkest piece I've written so far, and my most like fucked up thing I've written. And she was really upset by it, but also really, it's so weird to say, she was really happy for me, because she was like, I feel like this book is gonna like touch a lot of people, because there is like I was saying before, there's a lot of empathy in
Yeah.
the book, and like, the empathy for the disenfranchised and the people who are downtrodden, and people who are like on the outside, the marginalized.
Hmm.
The book is really like kind of an exploration of all those things. And my mom could have easily reacted, with concern or confusion, but she was just so excited for me. And just I think, mothers are so special because they really do usually like love unconditionally. And fathers, I feel like, have more strict expectations. um, but moms are great because moms, are the ones that carry us for 9 months, and they pretty much they love you no matter what. And my mom is like no exception. And I'm really blessed to have her in my life. I don't know what I would do without her.
Well, I think that the cheer that she brings to you is now kind of like permeating farther out because of those posts and stuff. It always makes me happy to see, like,
So yeah.
but it makes me think about my mom. I'm lucky enough to have a similarly supportive mom. I've been doing book related podcast stuff since 2011, and she's always been making, like, as a little gift, she'll make like shirts for my podcast,
Oh,
or like a poster for me to hang on my wall that's about my podcast or something. Um and so yeah, I've had that, and I think that, it's great to have those type of like, what's the word I'm looking for, like unconditional supporting people in your life,
yeah,
where it's
yeah,
like, I love you, do your thing, I support you no matter what. And I know for not everybody it's gonna be their mom, but like your brother, your best friend, whatever it is, like, I
yeah,
love seeing that people have those types of people in their lives, because and I hopefully try to be that for people too. But yeah, like seeing that kind of just the pride, the mom's pride for you is always like a little ray of sunshine.
yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna tell her you said that.
I do. I'm like, hey, honey, look, she did another one, and she's probably just tired of it by now. But it's just, yeah. Um, all right, so we're gonna get to this book, but um, because it came up in conversation, who was I talking to? Oh, I did a deep dive. I'm doing a deep dive series for the Stephen Graham Jones Indian Lake trilogy,
Oh,
and so Greg Green. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Greg Green. Um, was one of the people that was on the deep dive episode, and you came up because I was mentioning at the beginning of the episode who I'd be talking to soon, and he brought up something that I've heard quite a bit, and it's that your titles are, you have kind of a specific kind of format where they're like longer and they're kind of more of a thought than a title,
yeah.
but your covers are always so incredible. And
Thank you.
so really this is just a general, like, I'm sure you hear it all the time. Your titles are awesome and your covers are amazing, but like, um, how do you always hit it out of the park every time? Like, is it the same people? Do you have like just the best luck?
I'm gonna sound so conceited right now, but like I feel like I have really good taste when it comes to things.
Mm,
Like I have
you
really good
must.
taste when it comes to art. I love, like I keep my finger kind of on the pulse of like what's current and like what's cool in like horror art, when I found the Kim Jacobson painting for Things Have Gotten Worse, I feel like that was such a coup. I feel like that painting really brought the story to life. Um, we recently completed the cover art for a novel that we're going to announce soon. I wish I could tell you more about it, but I just can't right now because the publisher won't let me. But I love the publisher; they're awesome, and it's going to be really cool when we announce it. And like everyone's faces is just going to like melt, and it's going to be so cool. But like the cover art for this new novel is so visceral and so sophisticated, but also really shocking and really grotesque. It's just everything I want it to be. And I feel like I've kind of reached a point where I've earned publishers' trust,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, Eric knows what he likes. He knows what's gonna work. Um, and yeah, like I mean, as far as like the cover art goes, like I've pretty much on all of my releases, I've had like final say on my cover art, and I've been really proud of what I've put out. Just seeing them like on the shelf behind you, like I'm really
Yeah.
proud of those covers. And then when it comes to like my titles, someone described my titles as like very baroque,
Okay.
like very like operatic and like just very formal too. And I love that. I kind of love that juxtaposition of something really like ornate and baroque with um, depravity and like something really unsettling. Yeah, I'm very very fortunate that I feel like publishers really trust me and know that like whatever I pick, it's gonna do really well.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing it's done for you is it's given you a very specific kind of recognizability.
It's
Um,
giving me like a brand.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess a brand would be a much easier word to say than whatever I
yeah,
just said. But yeah, like it's definitely a brand. And as much as like everybody says the don't judge a book by its cover thing, dude, like when I see people post like book covers and stuff, there's so much that makes me excited or interested just from looking at what that is, that it does. It doesn't matter if you've read the book and loved it or whatever, but like it does matter when it's like I'm trying to get excited about something.
yeah.
And so yeah, like all of your covers are very kind of arresting. Like they make you engage them, I think is one of the things about them.
I love that word, arresting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like book covers are so important now when we're all on our phones, just like endlessly scrolling. We're on the feed. What's going to make you stop and pause and be like, oh, what's this? Or like, what's going to even make you click the like button?
Hmm.
It's hard for visibility now. I feel like Twitter or X now, it's so hard to get people to like stop scrolling,
Yeah.
and focus on whatever, book you're trying to like promote. Um, so it is important to have something that's eye catching and uh, original, something that really just shocks people. I feel like
Hmm.
that's what good art is supposed to do.
And yeah, and I'm trying to like because you hit it on both sides. Like the covers and the titles are good, but the actual content is good too. Some people, the content is great and they don't have that visual or
Yeah,
whatever kind of part to them, and so the covers are a different story. And like
yeah,
that doesn't mean their book is not good.
yeah.
You've built that brand that is very, yeah, like I said before, arresting. So
Thank you. I appreciate
yeah,
it.
so to the people who are listening, don't let a bad cover dissuade you if the story sounds good. But like, yeah, props to Eric for what you've got going on.
Thank you.
All right, so for anybody who's listening, this book is the book that we're here to talk about. Is this skin was once mine and other disturbances, which is a collection of 4 stories that's coming out April 2nd, I want to say,
Yes. Yep.
in the United States. I don't know if it's different internationally.
It's the same in the UK.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Awesome. I know that's always so weird. Like sometimes they
I
have it
know.
months ahead, sometimes we have it months ahead.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's a collection of 4 stories, and it's basically like 2 kind of novella-ish length and 2 like shorter ones. Um, so I read this. I've only read this and Everything the Darkness Eats. That's the only stuff I've read from you because I'm new. I'm a new reader to you. Um, and I always feel shame sometimes when I'm like, I haven't read enough of your stuff when I'm talking to authors, but that's my new phrase to like give myself, to like kind of forgive myself, is I'm a new reader to you. So
I mean, the great thing is books don't have expiration dates.
yeah.
So, like, there's no shame. There's no shame.
Yeah.
And I mean, you should see my TBR shelf. It's like
Oh my
piled
God. Yeah.
high of like mountains of books. So,
Oh yeah. I've got like, it's like 30 over here that have just been in the last couple months are have accumulated. We can only read so much. So yeah,
and I keep buying books. Like, what's wrong with me?
it's if it's not the worst problem to have.
That's true. Yeah.
So before I dive into talk, I want to talk about a general topic, and I think that's going to give me like ins to talk about specific parts of the different stories. And obviously, we're going to talk about this in a non spoiler way. But I think one of the things that I've picked up on from you, and I'm saying this like this is like me discovering something, and it's not anything. It's an obvious thing, is that you kind of push boundaries and and go places. And I was thinking about it because I was thinking after I read your book, I was thinking about your what got me thinking about it was I had heard you on another podcast, and I think it was This Is Horror, where you were talking about how you re-released Everything the Darkness Eats and updated the ending. And if I remember correctly, the original ending was a little too optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that got me thinking about like what drives you and motivates you. And it's obvious that like you kind of like to look for boundaries, push boundaries, go past boundaries.
Yeah.
But I think that I was thinking about this because I'm just a reader. I don't write, I don't create content other than recording a podcast. I know this is the longest question ever. I think that I don't always want to be pushed.
Mm-hmm.
So like I choose what to read when,
Yeah.
but when I'm ready to be pushed, it's so good
Yeah.
that there are books out there where the author is doing the push. And
Yeah.
so I feel like you and like the style of your writing and stuff is very necessary for when we want to get a little uncomfortable. We want to think about the things that are not easy to think about.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's a question there, but like that's definitely something that it seems like is obviously important to you. Um, so what about pushing boundaries or exploring kind of the extremities of ideas uh, is important to you?
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate everything you said. I like that means a lot to me. I'm definitely a student of like Clive Barker and Jack Ketchum and writers who really push the envelope, like Dennis Cooper, writers like that are very transgressive and very um, very bold, audacious. And I'm not at all like saying that my work is in like on the same level as them. But I'm just saying like I've been very influenced by
Mm-hmm.
their work, and I respect them a great deal. As far as what like really draws me to like writing transgressive content, I think it's because I I'm really fascinated by people and humans and how we interact with one another. And I'm a little pessimistic when it comes to when I think of like humanity and our future, like our collective future as a race. Um,
Yeah.
I I struggle to think with optimism when it comes to humanity. I see a lot of suffering, and I see a lot of cruelty. I see a lot of injustice and just awful things happening to other people. And that's what I like to write about. I have written some pieces with like supernatural elements, like Everything the Darkness Eats. There is some like cosmic elements at
Mm-hmm.
play there, but really, like the crux of that story is what happens to Malik and Brett and
Yeah.
how they are kind of like just decimated by this gang, this local gang who attacked them for being a gay couple in this small town. Um, I'm just very interested in writing about human suffering and writing about the worst things that people can do to one another.
Yeah.
Um, I saw a review of my work recently, like this book in particular, the Skin Was Once Mine, and it was interesting because it was a review in which the author of the review kind of made the case that fiction like this, like transgressive, shocking, in your face fiction, can really restructure the way you think about how you would act
Yeah.
in life, and like how you carry yourself and how you interact with other human beings. And I think that that is the one of the really valuable things about fiction, where you're analyzing and you're reading about people doing heinous, horrible things to one another. You see that suffering, you see that cruelty, and you recognize it for what it is. Um, And I think it can change the way you do carry yourself in the world. I think fiction has the power to provide catharsis, and I think it has the power to really restructure our brains and how we view ourselves and view others. And I'm not saying that I necessarily want to be preachy and write fiction that's going to like send a message to people. Like sometimes I really just want to tell a story that's like fucked up and like gross. Like I'm
Yeah.
interested in just having fun sometimes, but I really think fiction is so powerful, and I think especially transgressive fiction is really um is a real it's weird to say, but it's like a safe space for talking about really uncomfortable things. And like you said, like maybe you don't want to experience it right now,
Right.
but it's not for everyone, and it's not for every moment of your life. You can't eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. It's something that you can approach when you're ready. And
Right.
that's why I put the content warning at the beginning of the book, to really like warn people and let them know, like, this book is very stressful. It's going to make you uncomfortable. And I want to make sure that you're in the right headspace for reading it. Because I feel like it's at least my responsibility to let people know what they're getting themselves into. Um, and yeah, that was kind of a long-winded explanation. I hope that's okay.
No, that's great. And I like that you kind of delineated that sometimes there's a message and sometimes it's just fun to play.
Yeah.
Because like both are legitimate. But like, because I recently have been doing these deep dives into Stephen Graham Jones stuff, there's a example that comes to mind of like that type of thing of like changing someone's perspective about an injustice. And I'll try and be as succinct as possible, but like in his Don't Fear the Reaper book, two of the characters are talking about this area of land that was cut out of a national forest for like a bunch of rich people, and like it is beautiful, blah blah blah. I can see what the person saw in it and then why they wanted to be here. And the one of the characters says the same things that Christopher Columbus saw, and the other character was a little confused, and the response was something that wasn't his. And like just that right there is so, it's not transgressive, but it challenges you in the moment of like, oh, I get it. Like I have to think about the cruelty that came with
Yeah.
everything that led to here we are right now. And
Mm.
so it challenges you to think about your position on that topic. And it kind of tells you like, maybe it's not as, Columbus Day as we think it is. There's a lot of bad stuff to that. And so that's an example I thought of because I just read it, but like that type of content in books does have the ability to make you introspective and think about, oh, how do I treat people? I didn't realize that maybe the thing I said or the thing I did is really damaging to someone, and now I understand this differently. So there's definitely a lot of value in that side of it. Um, Also, fun to just get gory sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun to just like have fun and uh, be gross and be weird. But there are times when I do want people to be introspective, and I want them to really think about how they might react in like a similar situation, or just how they present themselves to the world. I think a lot of my fiction is very uncomfortable for people. Um, but it's deliberately uncomfortable. And I I don't know. I enjoy pushing those buttons. I've always been someone who
Yeah.
has enjoyed pushing buttons and pushing the envelope, and um, being like as strange as possible. That's just like exciting to me as an author.
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of going off on that point and diving into one of the stories in This Skin Was Once Mine, that brings to mind the story, all the parts of you that won't easily burn. And because like essentially without going too deep into this, all right. So basically, the setup of the story is um, the main character is sent out by their partner to buy a kitchen knife for a special event. They're having a dinner party at their house, and so they find a specialty shop that has what they're looking for, and then so they go there, and it's a very expensive kind of knife, and instead of paying an exorbitant fee for it, the shopkeeper offers an alternative solution where I'm going to cut you with this knife and I'm going to stick a piece of broken glass in the wound,
Mhm.
and then you can own the knife. And um, what comes of that is it very rapidly becomes this like obsessive. I don't know if fetish is the right word, but like
I would say I would agree with
yeah.
fetish. Yeah.
Um, and it and so but what it did was it contrasted like before that moment that this character walked in that shop, they thought they had a great life. They had a very loving partner. They had a great relationship, long lasting thing. Everything was fine. According to them, their world seemed good.
Mhm.
And then they go into this shop and they have this experience, and it like unlocks something inside of them that they didn't really know was there to be unlocked, and it just causes a lot of
Which is, I feel like
changes.
that's terrifying, right? Like,
Yeah,
I think it's terrifying if, something's dormant inside you. Like something, I mean, it could be anything, like cancer, some sort of disease, but like to have this fetish dormant inside you and it's just awakened one day. It's like you flip a switch and you're like a different person.
yeah,
That to me is really scary. And I think that piece, the piece that we're talking about, all the parts of you that won't easily burn, it's I think it's one of the most frightening things I've worked on just because it does remind me of moments in my own life where I've I've realized something at a later date that I was like, "Oh, this was always a part of me."
yeah.
And it's really frightening when you have those moments of like recognition. Um, but yeah, no, I'm glad it worked for you.
Yeah, because it forces like this radical honesty on yourself, kind of in a way where that you have to come to terms with I am not the same person now that I was 24 hours ago.
Mhm.
Nothing I can do to change this, and it's such a cataclysmic event, to just be suddenly this different person.
Yeah.
But it's written in a way where you automatically think to yourself, what if that happened to me? And then you start to go down that road and you're like, has that happened to me? And it like makes you think about yourself in ways where it's like, but then it kind of is an analogy for everybody changes all the time. Like
Yeah.
we're not the same. I'm definitely not the same person I was a decade ago, much less when I was, graduating high school or whatever.
Yep.
And those people that we were then are gone forever. And there's a sadness to that, but there's also like, you know, it's just
It's
that's
inevitable.
that's the way reality works. So
Yeah.
I feel like that story worked so well for me because obviously it's kind of an extreme example of something, but it challenged you to think about what permanent changes are in our life and stuff, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're a new person each day without being super cliche about it, but I think we change daily. We're constantly transforming. Um, and I think for me, like change is really frightening.
Mm,
I'm not someone that really like loves change. I love my routine. I love like knowing that I'm in control, even though I know I'm not in control of like really anything. Um, but yeah, that story. It was kind of difficult to write in certain parts because it's scary in that like your whole life could change one day, just a chance encounter, and it awakens a fantasy you didn't even realize that you had, and you're
yeah,
willing to risk it all for that fantasy. um it like
yeah,
lives get ruined, unfortunately, but
yeah,
the motivation for doing that is like human connection and something bigger than us as human beings. So it's very complicated, I feel like.
hmm And you mentioned cancer. I went through cancer. I'm healthy now. I'm recovered or whatever the word is. But I did go through that, and it was that thing that was just didn't choose it to happen,
Yeah.
but it happened. And the guy that I was 3 years ago versus now, you know, totally changed. I'm a very lucky person, and I got through a very scary thing. But like, yeah, there are just parts of your life that you have no control over, and it's just like. But I think that there's I always my mind always goes to the adaptability of people. Like we have an almost endless capacity to endure.
We do.
Um,
We persevere. Yeah.
yeah, even if it's miserable,
Yeah.
even if like we should have just given up at some point. Like I think that's one of the reasons that we are how we are is that we can just get through so much stuff. So I don't know if there's a thought there, but yeah, that's just what this conversation has made me think about. Is like there's also like a weird adaptability or just like a drive to never give in that's kind of
Yeah.
built into people in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But anyway, fantastic story. And I love the type of stories that it when you read it, it makes you ask questions about yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah, those
Thank
are
you. I appreciate that.
those are always really cool. I want to say another thing that I thought. All right, so jumping away from all the parts of you that won't easily burn, Seedling had a really interesting idea in it as well. And I think I took my experience was it was much more kind of a simple thing than it's not as layered and complicated. But like so basically, protagonist's mother has died of cancer, and so their father calls and says, "Your mom died," so they want to go back to their home and everything. But there's an element to the story where once they are at their home and trying to leave, they notice like a little wound on themselves, like a little opening with some like I don't even know how to describe it, but like black, sappy, syrupy weirdness in there,
Yeah.
and realize that when you push into it or poke on it, like there's like a good feeling and like an
Yeah.
unexpected, like a creepily good feeling, I guess is the way I would describe it.
Yeah.
Um, and as the story goes on, it becomes like interacting with wounds on other people, like protagonist and their father. And I kind of just took that as like how we have a morbid curiosity about the bad stuff of the people in our lives and digging into the traumas or the old wounds and stuff like that. It felt like it kind of a pretty obvious kind of idea that you were playing with.
Yeah.
But then again, it made me think about like there are those conversations where it's like, man, you should just back down and like we like for whatever reason we can't let go of wanting to talk about that uncomfortable thing.
Yeah. I mean, that story in particular was also really difficult to write because it was really inspired by me coming to terms with like my parents' mortality, and
Mm,
something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Um, just realizing that there will be a day when I can't call them up anymore, and uh, that makes me upset.
yeah,
That makes me really sad, and I don't like thinking about that. And but in the same breath, I've also been told that it's imperative to write from what wounds us and what upsets us,
yeah,
and that to me is is it's special when you write about something, when you write literally from you're like dipping your pen in the wound and writing from that. um, that to me I think is when really great fiction comes into the world. um, so I really tried to push myself. I really tried to like write about something that made me very uncomfortable, and this story was the end result. Yeah, um, it's very maudlin. It's a very like somber piece, and it's probably like one of the more quiet stories. It's probably like the quietest story of the collection, but it also has that like ferocity to it,
Hmm.
especially like near the end.
Oh yeah.
Um, and yeah, no, I'm glad that it worked for you. That one worked for you as well.
Well, and now that you say that, fear of the loved ones' mortalities and stuff, I've definitely gone down those kind of thought processes of my brother or my mother or whatever. What if I found out they died?
Yeah,
What would the next thing that I do be? How would I feel?
yeah.
And yeah, and like you just kind of bother yourself with it and like can't let it go, and
I'm a
you
little
almost
bit of
take
a
yourself to the.
masochist too. Like I don't know about you, but like I will like go out of my way to think of things that upset me. Like I will literally like I will think of things that just like really don't sit well with me, and it's like almost like a masochism. It's like a level of masochism where like I hate the way it feels, but I also kind of like respect the way it feels. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's very complicated.
Yeah, I don't think that I go to that extent, but I think that there's a natural compulsion in most people to like
Yeah.
think of the bad stuff sometimes, and probably more so once you've experienced some kind of loss. Like, my father passed away 20 years ago or something like that. And grandparents and other stuff along the way. So like once you've experienced loss and kind of the timeline of loss, it's easy to just kind of insert another person and then like
Mhm.
bother yourself with it. But this type of thing, this kind of a thought experiment where while it could be maybe unhealthy, it could be healthy too. Like it could be the thing that someone needs in order to remember why they care about someone, or um, choose to be more involved in someone's life or something like that. So there is like that. There's a sunshine to the darkness kind of thing, maybe.
I hope so. I feel like this story was very healing to write, and very cathartic. And like I said, horror is a very cathartic genre. It allows us to really be introspective and observe people at their worst possible moments in life and in the character's life, and uh we witness them suffering, we go through it with them, but like we are safe while it happens, while we read about it or while we watch it, in a movie. And that's why I think horror is just such a special genre. I think it allows us to do things and interact with certain taboos that you can't really explore in a lot of other genres.
Hmm. Yeah, and I totally agree. I think that of all, I'm going to say this and I'm going to be wrong at some point. I know it, but like of all the type of stuff you can read, horror is at the top of the list as far as like working empathy, like
Mhm.
building empathy, challenging empathy. Um, and that's I mean, I think all fiction, any time that you have to see things from the perspective of someone else, that's working empathy,
Yeah,
regardless. But like the thing about horror is it's like what scares you and how we react and stuff like that. So it's like it's getting more to the point than like,
mm,
you know, something that's more mundane. So
totally,
it's it's doing like some heavier lifting, I think, in a way.
totally.
Yeah. Um, I want to say, all right. So I'm gonna go to Prickle, which is the story that ends the book, because recently, no, at the beginning of the year, I put up an episode of my podcast where Becky Spratford and Emily Hughes joined me,
Yes.
and we did like a preview of 2024, and Becky talked about this book, and if I was a better podcaster, I would have had the quote available. But she basically said that like the final the final line in this book is the final line of the story Prickle, and she said that the final line of your book was like, I want to say the best line that she'd read for some chunk of time, for the year, for
Yeah.
whatever. And so I'm going to build my thought off of that. So basically, the idea of Prickle is there's these two elderly gentlemen who had this ongoing friendship meeting in a park. You know, every Saturday they would get together, and one of them had gone away for medical reasons for like a decade, and then they were back. But they had this game they would play. They called it Prickle, where they would challenge each other to do cruel things. Um, and the reason they called it Prickle is because like it was supposed to kind of like make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And so it's one of those stories where it's so harmless
Mhm.
almost the entire time.
Yeah.
And then something happens that makes it horrifying. And I think that's the reason that Becky was calling out this very last line of the book, was that it made you learn about the idea of this Prickle game that they play earlier in the story and what it means, but you really get what it means at the very end of the story, and it's very effective. But
Thank you.
uh yeah, like, to me, I don't want to say the thing, because the thing I'm going to say probably would spoil the story. But what worked for me about this was, I guess, just I'll say it in a way that you'll probably understand what I mean. The extremity of the situation maybe not being what we thought it was.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the ante was upped in a way that was unexpected. And if that's too spoilery, we can cut that out.
No, I mean, the whole, it's building towards something inevitable in that story.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still hopefully shocking for readers when it happens. Um, that piece was actually the very final piece that I wrote for this collection. And I feel like it's really grounded in my background as like a playwright. So I started writing plays before I actually started writing fiction. I wrote like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of plays like in high school and in college, and I've always been really um, interested in like small dramas between like two or three characters and like one location where they never leave.
Yeah.
And I love establishing and building conflict from one location with very small cast of characters. I think that's where a lot of really compelling human drama lies. And I really wanted to write a piece that felt almost kind of like a play in some ways, and but felt like a Grand Guignol type play, like very
Yeah.
grotesque and very weird, and um, not like in your face violent, but just like there's something off here. Um, and honestly, I mean that piece and all the parts of you that won't easily burn. I feel like those two are my favorite pieces from this collection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just because I feel like they tap into things that I'm really interested in writing about, like the ways in which we torture ourselves, the way we torture other people, um, just for the sake of human connection.
Yeah. And of the whole book, I feel like there's kind of one of the more raw moments of love or need or expressions of connection, where the I think it was Mr. Chesler was the one who was sent away for medical reasons,
Hmm.
and Mr. Spiro was the other friend in the situation. And
Yep.
Chesler had said that, and I'm going to get it wrong, but basically, like, I would give anything for you to have gone with me, or something like that.
Yeah.
So um, that is such a like a, especially if you weren't expecting it, such a big thing to tell someone.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
sad.
such a
Kind of
vulnerable,
sad. Yeah.
yeah, like um, thing to say, and um, yeah, like, but we've all felt something like that, like, I
Yeah.
think we've all kind of been there and needed someone, or didn't know how to say we needed someone, or whatever it is. And so I feel like that moment where he said that was very important to the story. If there wasn't that part in the story, whatever all the other stuff that happened wouldn't, I think, have as much gravity to it.
It's like how we talked about having the dedication at the beginning of the book with Paul Tremblay, like kind of adds like a layer of sweetness to the book.
Yeah, yeah,
Like that moment, hopefully, when I wrote it, I was really trying to like establish a little bit of tenderness before we got to the really
yeah.
like awful depravity later on in the story. And I
Hmm.
feel like when you have those moments, it really complements, it's like having like a fancy dish at a restaurant and you have like different notes of like
Right.
spicy and then like sweet
Yep.
and savory, like all of it kind of works together, and just creates something really just really tasty and wonderful to consume. And
Hmm.
I'm definitely thinking of stuff like that when I'm writing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it in my mind it made me ask the question like, what would the story be if somehow Mr. Spiro had gone with or had been
Hmm.
more in Chesler's life or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really cool. And I agree with Becky. I think it was a great way to end the collection.
Thank you. Thank you. I love
Um,
Becky.
she's I met Becky in 2017 at StokerCon on the Queen Mary in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Not in my girlfriend would yell at me if I said Long Beach, which is in Los Angeles. But um, and I interviewed her for my podcast, and like it was funny because I was on this boat and I was talking to all these people I knew, and oh, what are you up to right now? Oh, I'm going to go interview Becky Spratford. Oh, you get to talk to the librarian, and that's how everybody referred to her.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the legend until
She is a legend. Oh
a
my
lot
god.
later, but
Yeah.
and I'm lucky enough to live in the same state as her. Like we probably live about 45 minutes away from each other, so we could like meet up and or go to events and stuff and bump into each other. So
That's
yeah,
amazing. She's been so supportive of me. Like, shout out to Becky. She's just a real one.
well, she understands talent in a way that is just like she's almost an oracle. It's kind of crazy. Like anything that she says, I 100% take as it's Bible because I have not seen her be wrong.
Yeah.
So
She's great
yeah,
taste.
yeah. So anybody who's listening, I know on Twitter she's RA for all,
Yeah.
and if you just want to know what's happening or what will be happening, like she is the person to follow.
Yeah.
So,
She's
but
great.
yeah, she really rightly nailed that. Like that was like the perfect end to the collection. But I do want to talk about This Skin Was Once Mine because it's the titular story, but there's a lot going on there, and I think that the thing I like about that story is um, kind of similar setup with the coming back home because of the health of a parent kind of thing. But I think what I pulled from this is it really is it is all about the connections between people. It's that parent child relationship and how it forms us. It's what our dedication to. I'm sorry about the thumbs up. That's an Apple thing. So if you
Oh, no
keep seeing
worries.
that,
No worries.
I gesture a lot. Um, it, it, uh, how much our impressions of our parents shape who we are and how we act, whether we know it or not. There's a lot going on there, but yeah, there's a lot of. I was digging a lot into the psychology of like the parent child relationship and how impactful they can be, maybe in ways they don't even realize.
Yeah. I mean, that story, it was the first piece I wrote for this book, and I feel like it's very much rooted in trauma
Hmm.
and how trauma really redefines us, and how unfortunately a lot of the time trauma shapes us and we can't always break free from the things that hurt us, and we sometimes perpetuate awful things and we continue the cycle of trauma
Yeah,
after having endured it for so long. That's what I really wanted to explore with this piece. And everything else you said about family and forming us and all of that, it's very accurate too. I feel like inherited trauma is huge. It's a huge part of the story, and how we kind of are bequeathed um, trauma from our parents.
Yeah.
We inherit their baggage, and we can either try to break free from it and make our lives better and go forward and do our thing and live a happy, healthy life, or we can wallow in it and we can let it consume us. Uh, and I'll obviously leave spoilers out, but readers can kind of see where the story goes from there. Um,
Mhm.
but those are what I was thinking about when writing that particular novella.
The kind of inelegantly, but like this is the way our minds work. What I kept thinking about when I was reading that story, or after I had read that story, was there's a song by Tool called "Prison Sex," and the whole theme of that is like you do the thing that was done to you to
Yeah,
other people, and there's like it goes into all the psychology of control and whatever it is, and like you said, kind of redefining what reality means and stuff like that. So like that was kind of my shorthand in my mind of like one of the bigger kind of themes of the story was that like the trauma that you get, maybe we visit onto other people in the same way because that's the only thing we know, or whatever the rationale behind it is.
totally.
So yeah, that and I'm like, oh man, this is like the lamest kind of connection, but that's what that's about.
I love
So
it. I love it. I'm not
yeah,
familiar with that song, but I'm gonna have to write it down and listen to it.
there's a and this is probably like the most explicit I've ever been on a podcast, but there's a line on there that in that song that has always kind of stuck with me because the song's name is Prison Sex. You can
Yeah.
kind of figure out what's going on with it.
Right. Yeah.
There's a line that goes, "I have found some kind of temporary sanity in this shit, blood, and cum on my hands,"
Wow.
and that really says it all right there.
That does
Like,
say it all.
so yeah, not that this story is that song,
Yeah.
but there are I think complementary themes that it made me think of that song. So
Nice. I'll have to listen to it for sure.
yeah, I just want to kind of zoom out because probably we're getting close to the amount of time we're gonna have together, but zooming out into what we've already talked about and the setup that you gave and the fact that you wrote a thing at the beginning of the book, kind of not warning but preparing readers for what they're in for, and
Yeah.
your kind of brand is extreme and graphic and gross and stuff like that. I feel like I see so much humanity in the things that you write, that I try to kind of keep myself in the mindset of it's extreme, it can be gross, it can be disturbing, but like you kind of said, we're looking at people, we're looking at what people do, why they do it,
Hmm.
and how it affects them, and that's so important. And so that's kind of like how I feel when I'm done reading something by you is this is a human experience, and we're exploring what that is and how it feels, or how it what it means. And so um I don't want people to just think it's just the scary stuff.
Yeah.
There's like a purpose behind it. There's a not I don't want to say message because that's putting, you know, an expectation on it, but there's more to it than just being a gratuitous thing. It's never, I don't think, really a gratuitous thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in writing about people.
Yeah.
I love like supernatural elements, and I'll weave them in if I feel like it. But at the end of the day, like I really love writing about just human beings doing horrible things to one another, because I see a lot of that like on the news and on social media. I just see people being awful, and
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of human drama is. I think that's where conflict lies, and I think that's what makes really interesting transgressive fiction. Um, and I never want to go into a story like trying to be like didactic or anything, but I just I'm very interested in writing about humanity and like the cruelties that we inflict on one another and the suffering we endure.
Yeah. I wrote something down at some point in our conversation that I was going to do as a follow up to something you were saying. And I don't remember what you were saying, but I'm just going to read you the thing that I wrote.
Okay.
And we're going to see if we can get something out of this. I just wrote down, love a flawed thing. So I don't know if there's anything there, but at some point you were talking about something that made me want to follow up and talk about. And I think it's just kind of like,
I mean, I think all my characters are flawed in some ways.
yeah.
I mean, every every character I've written, I feel like has been flawed, and they struggle to love themselves and they struggle to love other people because of their flaws. Maybe not because of their flaws, or maybe because of their flaws. Who knows? It depends on the story. Um, but I find that kind of writing about queer characters that are flawed is really important to me.
hmm
Writing about complex queer characters, characters that are not perfect and like pillars of propriety and like that we should model ourselves after. I'm interested in writing about messy, dark,
Yeah.
complicated queer characters. And I know that makes a lot of readers uncomfortable. And I'm sorry that it makes them uncomfortable, but I literally have to write this stuff.
Yeah.
It's really important to me. And um, I try to do it with empathy and I try to do it with care and tenderness, but um, people are going to react the way they're going to react. And like what we were saying earlier, like this stuff, this material isn't for everyone and it's not for all the time. But
Right.
maybe it's for right now, depending how you feel.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. And the other thing that I think when love a flawed thing brings me back to when you were talking about how you didn't have, I don't remember exactly what you said, but an optimistic kind of outlook on humanity in general.
Hmm.
And I'm the same way. But I love people.
Yeah,
It's kind of weird. It's like, I think that it's like, I can see that the general, um, situation isn't great,
yeah.
but that doesn't stop me from being optimistic.
Yeah,
Um,
I like people too. I love
yeah,
being around people. I don't really enjoy being alone that often, to be honest. Like
yeah,
I like being around people. I get very sad when I see a lot of suffering and injustice and people being treated poorly. I By
yeah.
other people. It makes me really, really, really sad and angry. Um, so I have very complex feelings about people in general.
Yeah. But one thing that what you were saying, I think that it's important that we see everybody authentically, and like you said, queer characters not always being like the ideal perfect person,
Yeah,
absolutely necessary. Because like we all have our own kind of weird, uniqueness,
yeah,
and there's always going to be some darkness and some light in probably most, if not everybody. So yeah, I think that everybody needs to feel okay with seeing anybody, whoever they are, however they are, being a real person.
yeah. I think it's important for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, wow, man. I knew this was going to happen. So, like, I feel like just the way that I am as a reader, I am just turbo empathy, and so I really connect with when the stuff I'm reading has a deeper meaning in it. But I also appreciate just like for the, fucked up for the sake of fucked up. So I knew that that's one of the reasons I was so excited about being able to talk to you, is because I've heard you talk on other podcasts, and I've gotten kind of a general feel for what is important to you. And I was like, ooh, I need to pick this brain. So I'm really happy that we got to do this. And for anybody who's new to reading Eric, I think you can pretty much start anywhere,
Yeah,
right?
I would
Like,
start anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
you obviously the really popular one is things have gotten worse since we last spoke, but um, I sometimes will point people to like the trees grew because I bled there, which is a short story collection that came out
Hmm.
last year from Titan. I'm really proud of that book. I feel like this might be even a good entry point for people.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you can really start anywhere.
Yeah, I think that with this collection, I after I finished reading it, I posted. I have like my own little personal Instagram where I just track the books I'm reading. I said something like, "I must be more of a twisted person than I thought," because, and maybe that's just like how effective your kind of warning or kind of setup is at the beginning. Because I was like, "Ooh, I have to prepare myself for this to go places,"
Yeah,
and I feel like it didn't. I was more prepared. I prepared myself more maybe than I needed to because I felt comfortable the whole time.
good.
So,
That's what we were going for.
so I feel like if you put yourself in the right mindset, when you get to the end of the book, you're like, oh, this was not, yeah, this wasn't as bad as maybe he made me think it was. So, um, but yeah, I'm just kind of trailing off, my friend,
No worries.
because I'm just kind of in the reverie of the discussion. But so kind of as a final thought, we talked about some of your um, peers that you admire and some of the people who inspired you and stuff. Aside from, can you think of other authors who are kind of in the same sphere as you as far as being more transgressive or being more kind of pushing boundaries and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Gretchen Felker Martin comes to mind
Mm-hmm.
with Manhunt, Alison Rumfitt with Tell Me I'm Worthless and Brainworms. Also, David Demchuk, who's a really great Canadian queer author. He wrote The Bone Mother and Red X. Um,
Oh yeah, okay.
I love his work. His work is just amazing. Um, I feel like Haley Piper is kind of in the same wheelhouse as me too, with like
Mm,
queer characters, but also like they're flawed and they're not like perfect and they're just interesting people, interesting characters. The really great thing. Oh, Joe Koch, another one. Joe Koch wrote a collection called Convulsive, and he has another one coming out through Clash. I think like this summer. But you know, the really great thing is like there's so much queer horror being produced now,
yeah,
which wasn't the case when I was in high school, even like early college. Like, I didn't see like a ton of queer rep in horror fiction. And now it just feels like the genre is just expanding so much, and there's so many up and coming authors that are really tapping into really just gruesome and visceral depravity with these unapologetically queer narratives. And I think it's exciting. It's like it's it's a real pleasure to be part of that movement of writers.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And yeah, Haley's one that I feel like is putting out books at an incredible pace.
Yeah.
Like there's always, I
She's so
think Haley
prolific.
has two books coming out this year or something. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I recognize all those. That's the thing, man. In the last couple of years, my whole goal has been, I want to kind of read some of my people that I always want to read, but I want the majority of the stuff that I read to be authors that are new to me so that I can
Mm,
continue to kind of expand my horizons and stuff. And so, yeah, doing this format of podcast has been great for that. But yeah, so I guess for anybody who's listening, anybody who has read those people and enjoyed them and hasn't read Eric, maybe now is the time if you enjoyed that stuff to kind of try reading some of Eric's stuff as well. All right, so I didn't bring it up earlier, and I always feel like when I'm done talking to an author that I can think of the 8 other things that I wanted to bring up that I forgot to in the moment. I want like a whole story about the shopkeeper
yeah.
and all the parts of you that won't easily burn. Like I
Yeah.
feel like there's something that could happen from just that shopkeeper. Is and I'm assuming you haven't written more stuff with that character, but has that occurred to you?
I haven't, because honestly, once I finish like a novella or like a short story, I kind of just put it, I compartmentalize it, and I kind of just put
Mm-hmm.
it in a box in my brain, and I just like file it away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now that you mention it, I definitely feel like I could expand on his story. I love how enigmatic he is, and how just we don't really get a lot of info about him, and I like that. But I
Yes.
also could see a world where maybe we do get more info on him, and we're kind of dropped into his life, and I could keep it, I could write it so that like we're distanced enough from him so that he remains mysterious, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also like close enough that we could really follow him. You're making like cogs turn in my brain now.
Well, and the thing I think that so you did something with that character that I think is effective with villains sometimes, where it's they're referred to more than they're seen.
Yeah.
Um, I think what's effective and what's alluring about the shopkeeper is all of the mystery, like you said. But that makes me wonder. So, have you ever read or heard of a book called The Raw Shark Texts?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So I was talking to Stephen Hall. You read the book?
I haven't. I have a copy of
Okay.
it though.
There's a character in that book that is one of like the main kind of bad guys.
Hmm.
But like if you look at this 420-page book, that character shows up maybe 8 pages or something like that.
I love that.
And just in reference, never directly.
Yeah.
But that character, almost more than anything else in the book, lingers with me more than other things. And it's because it's the idea of something instead of the actual thing. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's kind of what you did with this shopkeeper character. But that automatically gets me thinking, like, how did this all start? Because you show this kind of world that the protagonist kind of just accidentally bumps into, and how it has this kind of crazy impact on their life. But like, you didn't really show us much of that world,
Mhm.
and you didn't need to, and you shouldn't have. You did it exactly right, but that creates such like curiosity. So that's one of those nagging. And when I was talking to Stephen Hall about that, and I had kind of the same ideas. Like I could read a whole book about this character.
Yeah.
He's like he's like I had to tell myself not to write about him because he was taking over the story and it was messing things up. He's like, I was as fascinated as you are about this character, and I had to turn it down. I had to shut it down because it was messing up the story. So um, I like it when there's a character that the whole like gravity of that character is that we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I'm working on something now that's very much in that wheelhouse, where it's like his presence is kind of like lingering on every page, but he's not in the scene, you know?
Yeah,
And I love pieces like that where um the villain, or the antagonist of the story, is like their presence is felt even when they're not actually present. And that to
yeah.
me, it's like what you don't see is scarier than what you do. And
Hmm.
I love that. I think that's where really interesting conflict comes from, and I think that's where really interesting like villainy comes from too.
Yeah, I was talking about this recently with like sometimes with horrors like slashers and stuff like that, if you don't give someone a specific motivation,
Hmm.
it's up to the person watching or reading to like fill that blank.
Yeah.
And then when they're doing that, they're putting in the thing that they're scared of. So like it's the most effective because they're deciding what the scary part is. So it's
Right.
the thing that works on them the most. So yeah, there's something really effective about that type of storytelling where you leave something for the reader to fill in, or the watcher, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
definitely agree. I think that that's it depends on the story, but I think it worked. Hopefully it worked really well in this case.
Yeah, because there was something, and I don't want to beat this to death, but there was something about the shopkeeper that was like um the persuasiveness of the shopkeeper, since we saw him so little,
Hmm.
was like how did this happen? Like you have to like everything makes sense, and then you're like, wait a minute, how do we get here? And so yeah, like yeah, there's something to it. Yeah, for sure. That was
Yeah.
really good.
Thank you.
All right, well, I want to just going to wrap it up really quick, but Eric, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk to someone you've never met before about your book. And I I've discovered that I'm more. I always say the thanks for coming on because that's the polite thing. I'm more thankful for you taking all the time for creating the thing that brought us together. So thanks for writing such incredible stories and making them compelling and making them something that people want to talk about. I think that's the real effort that I want to thank you for.
Thank you so much. That means like the absolute world to me. It's very special to know that like my books are being read by such like kind-hearted people and people that are, being thoughtful about what I'm putting out into the world. And um, that's just it brings like a tear to my eye almost. Like it's just really really special, and I'm very very honored. I was so honored to come on here and talk to you, and I can't thank you enough for having me.